1. The first time I experienced this one occasion, I was 16 years old in my bedroom. I have had other ghost encounters, but none like this, and nothing like I ever thought I would experience. So I was laying in my bed having the hardest time trying to fall asleep, per usual. I heard weird footsteps going up and down the hall. Bedrooms were on the second floor. Then down the steps going around the kitchen, living room, and back up the stairs and down the hall. I didn't think much of it, considering I had 2 older brothers, one who was always coming home late from being out with friends. But then it kept on happening. In the same repeated steps, up and down the hall, down the stairs and back up again, as if it were a pattern. So I finally thought to myself, this is silly. I'm just gonna go back out there when I hear the steps and see if it's one of my brothers. Heard the steps, peeked out of my bedroom door. Nothing. So I laid back down, trying to convince myself it could be anything. Probably just my imagination going wild because it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and minds usually go to the worst things any time we hear a noise late at night. But then the whistling starts. Now a little backstory. I never learned how to whistle, so I thought I would start trying. But for some reason I would always whistle the same short, basic whistle. I would start with a lower pitch, whip up into a higher pitch, and back down to the first pitch. I don't know why, it's just what I did to start getting better at whistling. Now back to the creepy stuff. As this thing was so obviously trying to get some sort of attention, it starts whistling the same pitch that I was earlier, down, up, and back down. That sound caught my attention instantly. I was obviously so freaked out that I was too afraid to fall back asleep that night. I thought it was over because I didn't hear it for a day or so, but then I heard it again. I was in the living room late at night watching George Lopez, as one does when it's late at night and nothing else is on. And I hear the whistle again. No footsteps this time, just the eerie whistle that I was so familiar with. Sounded like it was coming from the kitchen, which was on my left. But as it kept going, it started to sound like it was getting closer. Then I heard it like it was right next to my ear, almost. Freaked me out so bad I didn't know what to do. Flash forward a couple weeks from then. I was still hearing it late at night. But this night in particular, my boyfriend was with me. We were in the living room watching a movie when I started to hear the whistling again. Excited to know that someone was with me this time, but still just as freaked out because I knew he would be leaving soon, and I would be pretty much all alone, freaked out again. So I paused the TV and asked if he heard the whistling. He said no. And I told him to just wait. Sure enough, it did the same whistling that creeped me out to my core. He was freaked out, but tried to blame it on any other thing to try and ease my nerve. But I knew it couldn't be anything other than some type of paranormal thing. A couple months afterwards, I realized I haven't heard that whistling in a while. I was spending the night at my boyfriend's house. He has his room in the basement, and we're getting ready for bed. He eventually fell asleep, but I, of course, was still wide awake from watching Friends. It was either Friends or George Lopez, don't at me. When I started hearing it again, at my boyfriend's house this time, this is when I started to realize it was following me. No idea why, but that sent chills up my spine. So flash forward again a few months later, me and my boyfriend, of course, were at my house getting ready to leave to go to his house. One of my brothers were home, so I yelled that we were getting ready to leave. No response. I had an urge to look around the corner to see why he wasn't responding. He was on the living room floor overdosing on some pills he was taking, a long story. I called 911 and they sent an ambulance and took him to the nearest hospital. While we were in the waiting room, my boyfriend said he was going to go to the bathroom real fast. Now it was just me in the waiting room, no one else was there. I heard that same chilling whistle I have heard way too many times before. I ran outside the waiting room just to see when my boyfriend would come around the corner. I didn't want to be in that room alone, especially after that. That was just way too much for me. So I've heard the whistling a few times after that, but I haven't heard it in at least 3 or 4 years. I'm almost 23 now. Does anyone have similar experiences, or know what this means? I'm so confused as to why this thing started in the first place, why me, and why it was following me. Maybe that was its way of trying to comfort me. No, my brother had just overdosed. But it would know that freaks me out. I don't know what to think of it, obviously. It's probably not such a good spirit, but I would love some feedback. 2. A little background on this story. I was 12, living with my mother, 2 sisters, and stepdad. We'll call him D. We just moved across town from a house that was extremely haunted. We've since moved back in, but that's another story for another time. Into a pretty one-story home across from a park. The house itself wasn't too old, a little worn down, but nothing new paint and flooring wouldn't fix. In the first year of living there, we bought a dog, Shelby, who became attached to D. One afternoon, I was laying on the L shape of our couch, reading on my iPad. D had left to get groceries, my mom to get my sisters from school. It wasn't 5 minutes after they left that the breathing started. It was soft, and it came from the hallway, which was barely visible from the angle I was at. It didn't bother me. It was a warm spring day. I thought perhaps the windows are open and I was hearing a jogger, or someone walking their dog. When the breathing continued, I became curious. I got up, checked all the rooms, no windows were open. At this point, my heartbeat quickened. My knees felt a little like jello. "Hello?" I called out down the hall. I waited for a few moments, listening intently, but the breathing still came from the hall. I grabbed the home phone, dialing my mom first, D second. Each call went to voicemail, but when I got off, I noticed the breathing ceased. I let out a sigh of relief. In the laundry room, breezeway, Shelby napped in her kennel, unaware of what was happening. I turned to the hallway again, shaking my head, chuckling a little. I laid back down on the couch with my iPad. Just as I started reading again, I heard a long-winded sigh, again coming from the hallway. I jumped up, my heart rate skyrocketing again. "Who is there?" I asked. As I listened, I heard the unmistakable sound of the door open in the breezeway. Shelby began to cry and vigorously move in her kennel. Dee's voice filled the house. "Hey there, Shelby." I felt better immediately. Ignoring Shelby's freakout in her kennel, I walked into the kitchen. Before I rounded the corner to the breezeway, I said, "Thank God you're here. I heard the weirdest thing." But the room was empty. The door was closed. And Shelby was still having a fit in her kennel. I checked out the window, tears welling up in my eyes. Maybe Dee went back outside to get bags from his car. But the horseshoe driveway was empty. No one was there but me. After this happened, I waited outside for my mom. Both Dee and her arrived at around the same time, and they were both astounded when I told them what happened. This was the only experience I ever had in the 6 years we lived in that house. I wonder why the spirit chose to sound like Dee. Did it know it would make me feel better? Was it in good graces that they used his voice, or was it something malevolent? I've encountered many paranormal things in my life. Sometimes it's once a month or once a week, especially in the house we live in now, but never have I heard a spirit's voice as clear with my own 2 ears. Let me know why you think this happened only once, and what you think it was. 3. I'm not here to try to convince anyone that this story is true. I'm not here to try to make anyone doubt their beliefs. I'm here to tell a story. And you can take however many or few grains of salt with it that you please. I think it's pertinent to start with the fact that I was raised in a hyper-religious Southern Baptist household. As a child, little offenses that most parents would give a child a slap on the wrist for were seen not just as disobedience against my parents, but disobedience against God that seemed pretty lackadaisical about sending 9-year-olds to an afterlife of eternal misery and pain. So it wouldn't surprise you to hear that I was hesitant to tell anyone when I started to experience inexplicable phenomena. You see, I can hear spirits. I only just started talking about it, asking around online to see if anyone else experienced what I do on a daily basis. Through this I learned that it has a name: clairaudience. Describing it is akin to explaining a color to a blind person, but the closest sense to compare it to is hearing. It's proximity-based. Things get louder and softer, depending on how close or far I am from a particular space or object. Most of the time it is just ambient, and I don't even realize it. Sometimes it is garbled words, mumbles, or even humming. Other times, however, it can be deeply disturbing and physically disorienting with how intense it is, like screaming. Several times as a kid, I had one of these overwhelming experiences and it terrified me. I would just yell for help, saying, "Everything is too close." I had no way to explain it. I had no one to help me. I started researching in my teens, though, and I began to realize that there was a reason it was nearly impossible for people to understand. It was supernatural. And fearing judgment and punishment from a congregation that would see me as a pagan or spiritualist, I spoke of it to no one. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, I hear dead people, but not in a Sixth Sense reference kind of way. I really hear dead people." Now for the story. My wife's parents' house has always been loud, and over the years I started to learn why. My sister-in-law used to have awful nightmares of ghostly phantoms watching her from her closet. Her, my wife, and my mother-in-law all have strange tales of things moving, disembodied footsteps, the laughter of children. Their stories differ a bit at times, though. They will argue over small details like time of day, but they all agree with this fact. Something evil is in the garage, and my sister-in-law has taken the brunt of most of it. Even before I heard these noises, I could hear the energy in the house. Most of the time it lulls me into a daze. There are times when it sends chills down my spine, though, and the noise, for lack of better words, comes from the garage in those instances. Over the years of dating and subsequently being married to my wife, I have spent a lot of moments helping her father in their garage. It is unbearable at times, nauseating almost. My head swims and it all emanates from a spot on the wall. The part that separates the garage from my sister-in-law's room. Specifically, the spot right behind her closet. Though she doesn't quite understand it, I have explained my experiences to my wife, and expressed my discomfort and worry about the garage and my sister-in-law's room. And having taught myself to read tarot, I suggested trying to communicate, just to dissolve some of the fear of the unknown. She always said it would be a bad idea. She was right. One day we were asked to dog sit for my in-laws. My wife got caught up with something, so I offered to go myself and watch the doggos for a while. What I didn't tell her was that I thought it would be prime time to try some experimenting, alone and without much distraction. I arrive at the house, tarot cards in tow, and already something was off. The dogs aren't jumping, whining, or doing any of their usual excited dog things. They won't even look at me. They won't even approach me unless I call for them. I feel a rock in the pit of my stomach, and the noise starts to lull me in an almost hypnotic way. I drift through the kitchen, the sunroom, and the hallway that leads to the garage. By then, the noise is almost rattling my jaw in this deep, bassy way. It's not loud like I had experienced before. It was deep. Deep like a subwoofer. I opened the door and stepped inside. Instantly, I was bathed in the noise. I started to sweat despite it being relatively cold in the room. The garage reeked of ammonia and machining oil. I didn't even bother taking out the deck of cards. Honestly, I don't think I could have even read a spread properly at that point. I stepped my way closer to a row of shelves that leaned against the wall opposite my sister-in-law's room. The sound gave me an odd sensation of exhaustion and panic. I opened my mouth, but my throat was dry and locked up. I croaked out a strange cough-like noise, and the room started to spin. I had to brace myself on the shelving to avoid falling over. I tried to focus on my breathing and calm down, but I was calm, in a way. My heart wasn't racing. My breathing wasn't ragged. I wasn't shaking. I could feel panic in my brain, but my body couldn't. After a failed attempt to walk, I started to scramble. I had a hard time understanding myself in relation to the space, if that makes sense. My proprioception was turned on its head. Finally, I managed to squeak out a question. "What are you doing?" It stopped. Everything was quiet. No, quieter than quiet. I was still getting my bearings, ready to dart out of there like a bat out of hell, when I heard a voice. It was calm, cool, smooth, and clear as day. It cut through the silence. Waiting. I had never heard the noise so clearly formed into words before or since. After that, I couldn't even muster a run to get out of there, caught in the fear of inciting a predator's chase reflex. I haven't told my wife about my experience, but she knows that something happened that day. I don't want to scare her, but it's watching them in the house, waiting just like it said. I don't know if they're in any actual danger, but the thought creeps in my mind from time to time. What is it waiting for? And what happens when it's finished? 4. I'm just gonna go straight to the point here. Please excuse my English, it's not my first language, but I will try my best to explain this experience. I will disclose that we were still students and the names are all made up. I'm renting a house with 3 other people. This eerie experience happens over a 2-day span, so I will divide the story into the days it occurred. Day 1. We are all out of the house by the morning except for Alex. Brad and Chuck are doing their part-time job that day. Meanwhile, I am attending a seminar. Alex got a lot of time that day, so he went spring cleaning the house like crazy. It was a tiring session for him, but at 1 p.m. he went out to do his Uber business, until it was 5 p.m. Upon reaching the house, he said that he has strange feelings like he's being watched. So he went in and was shocked by the mess. The books on the table in the living room were scattered like they had been thrown. The thing is, a bowling ball that was placed in the corner of the living room is at the center of the living room at the time. It was even in the ball pouch before that. He quickly tidied up everything and went out again. I reached home at 7 p.m. that day and was happy to see that the house was cleaner than when I left that morning. Alex contacted me, asking if I'm home yet. I said yes, and he came shortly after. He was scared and told me about the incident that happened earlier. I couldn't believe him, so he showed me the video he took when he found it. I was shocked as well, but we decided to share the story with Brad and Chuck when they came back. It's 10:30 p.m. Brad and Chuck arrived home. They made their late dinner, and at 11:30 p.m.-ish we gathered around the living room, and Alex told everything to them and showed them the video as well. They came up with all possibilities, but could not come up with a conclusion. Brad went to the toilet in my room only to question us about the 2 blood spots on the floor in the middle of the room. We all entered my room and stood there to investigate. The blood spots weren't splattered on the floor. It was as if they dropped 1 foot above the ground. It was so thick, and the diameter of the 2 blood spots were 1 to 1.5 inches. We all got goosebumps right away. Brad took in the mop, and Alex lifted up the fan to clean the place, but the light suddenly went out. He puts the fan on again, and it was bright again. This time when Alex lifted up the fan, the lights went out, and again he said, "This thing want to play us," in a displeasing way. The lights then flicker aggressively until they turned on the way they were supposed to be. We proceeded to clean everything in the room and then went back to discussing it at about midnight. We could still not come up with a rational explanation, and we decided to sleep normally that night. Day 2. This is when things got pretty interesting. The day went on as usual, but today Alex had a class, so he went to the campus. I have my job to do at the campus as well. Brad and Chuck went out for their part-time job. Alex was home early that day. I also arrived early. We had time to chat from 6 p.m. till Brad and Chuck came by at 10:30 p.m. This time they did the usual, making their late dinner and ate in the living room. Me and Alex were pretty much unaffected from what happened last night, so we joked to Brad that he should not go into the kitchen as something is waiting for him. We laughed it off. Brad went into the kitchen anyway. In a second he came back and laughed at us, saying, "Who the fuck jokes like this? Whose hand was painted on the wall?" Me and Alex looked at each other. Chuck was enjoying his meal. He stopped eating, and we all rushed to the kitchen only to see the wall stained with blood again. But this time it has finger marks with it. There are 3 places that are being stained by those bloodied fingerprints. That was the peak of the paranormal happenings, and we all called our friends to come over and witness what we had just witnessed. They were all spooked by it, as were we. Our friends suggested that we sleep together that night. We did not get any sleep that day. Days were gone, and we did not once clean the blood stains on the wall. It disappeared by itself, most of it, like the blood seeped into the wall's paint. This experience was just too much for us. Even skeptics can be believers if they were with us at that moment. I have nothing else to say, but feel relieved after sharing this with all of you. It's up to you to believe it or not. 5. I'll start when I first moved into a house with a basement in 2006. My family and friends started seeing creepy shit in the house. Multiple friends on different occasions claimed that the little cute cow statues my mother put in my and my older brother's room moved at night. I always asked them why they didn't say anything when it happened, and they all said I didn't want to scare you guys and run upstairs. My older sister said her bedroom door on the first floor would swing back and forth viciously. My older cousin and brother would see something dash past their room. Thinking it was one of my siblings, they would chase it, only to find nothing when they entered the room or bathroom it ran into. This all came to light one night when my family was gathered in our parents' room because someone saw something I don't remember. Funnily enough, I had diarrhea that night and was too scared to go to the bathroom. I saw strange shit when I was a teenager, 2007 to 2009, but rarely. My first one was when I finally got the balls to sleep in my room in the basement level. I woke up one night to my phone light. I grabbed it and looked at it. It was a video of someone, maybe me, doing sit-ups. I looked up and saw a black figure at the doorway with the bathroom light right behind him. I brushed it off as my cousin, but didn't hear footsteps or the door close. So I looked back up and it was gone. Cue me in a fetal position saying I love you God 1,000,000 times. Another and the last one I saw was in 2009, when I finally moved to the first floor because my older brother no longer lived with us, and my older cousin moved away. One Sunday night I was trying to sleep but was having a hard time. I looked out the window and saw a black figure run from behind my dresser out the door. It made no noise. I was used to the stories and my father reminding us, don't be scared and they can't harm you. So turned around and faced the wall trying to sleep again. Then I started to see Medusa-type hair rising from between my bed and the wall. Maybe a shadow. I turned around once again. I started to see a little of the forehead. I told this story at a party me and my older brother were at, and he looked at me with a serious face and warned me not to talk about it. But there was another story where me and my friend were walking down the street in 2008, Halloween, where we passed this house that was covered in fog. We thought it was strange, so we looked at it, and noticed there was a figure walking around by the porch light that was so foggy. We had goosebumps for 10 minutes as we had to pass the house. We moved a lot after losing our house in the 2008 recession. 2012 to 2015, I moved into an older house. It was mostly made of wood and it creaked a lot. My friends and family that slept over when we came from parties claimed the TV would turn on at night in the living room. Not too scary. We eventually let my aunt move in and sleep in the living room. She had some stories, but nothing that concerned us because it seemed little things. I often had things go missing, but only to find them in my pants pockets later. I saw the outline of a little girl before I turned on the lights in the bathroom. My aunt claimed that one day when I left for college, right when I closed the door, she heard a loud crash come from my little sister's room. So she went to investigate and everything was normal. But the one that was the most intense, and last before we had to move again, was in late 2014. My little sister loves watching scary movies. My parents were in the living room, and we were in our separate rooms watching TV with the doors open. I began hearing a little girl getting brutally murdered. It kept going on for like 3 minutes before I got annoyed, and went into my sister's room asking her what she's watching. She wasn't watching anything, and was just on her laptop. She told me that she heard the noise, and it sounded like it came from my room, and was going to ask me the same thing. Then we got really concerned, went to the living room, and asked our parents if they heard it. They told us no. So we ended up going to each neighbor's house and asking them if they heard anything. They all told us no and wanted to come with us to ask other neighbors because now they were concerned. Me and my little sister are really close. and now look up paranormal stories because of our experiences. In 2016, again, new house that I still currently live in. Nothing paranormal that happens, other than my parents telling me that my TV turns on by itself. So I came from class one day and my sister is in her room. I walk into mine and my TV turns on, finally actually seeing this happen for once in my fucking life, and the only time I've seen it happen. I start by saying, "Hello, are you here?" Nothing. Bummer. I drop my backpack off and start heading out of my room, and my little sister asks who I was talking to. I explained and start leaving. She was nowhere ready to leave the house, but she got ready to leave quick and left with me. But again, the last thing that happened to me that I can't explain happened for a couple of months before I found out what it was. One Sunday after waking up from a late afternoon nap, waiting for Game of Thrones to come on, and I hear this tapping noise. It came and went for like an hour while I tried investigating. Then I saw it. It was my blind stringy thingy to make it go up and down. It looked like it was getting pulled on repeatedly. It kept going on, and I just kept looking. I wanted to grab my phone and record it, but I didn't want it to go away. I wanted to be there looking at it. It's been 2 years now, and nothing has happened since. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 123. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, this feels odd, recording paranormal stories on a Tuesday. Usually do it on a Wednesday. I'm not trying to take another week off, but I am trying to clear out a little bit of time so I can have a longer weekend, so I can do the decorating. I'll probably actually get it done in one day, but I'll likely go about and do all the other stuff the day after, putting up blinds and curtain rods and things like that. Only thing I can't find is I want things to go on the walls. And there's a thing I liked Andy Warhol did before he became Andy Warhol. Well, he was still Andy Warhol, but you know what I mean. Actually, what's he called? Warhol? Anyway, it was a picture of butterflies. I was looking to try and find a framed version of that. Obviously not the original. I'm not made of money. But I'd like to pay about 30 quid, no more than that for it. But I'm having trouble finding a frame I like. And I'll need other things for it. But essentially, I want the room to look a bit more like the room of a 37-year-old, you know. And I was going to say the teenager, and quite frankly, the last time I decorated this bedroom, I was a teenager. I think I was 18 or 19, and I was lucky to find the wallpaper very cheap. I think it was only a couple of pound a roll on a sale, and I've loved it so much, I just haven't had the heart to decorate since. Also, had a hard time finding wallpaper. In fact, to be honest with you, I don't even like the one I picked that much. I don't hate it. It's just of all the choices they actually had that place, I was like, well, I'm going to have to get something, because the room needs doing. Yeah. Well, so art will be my next quest. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.